يا لغتي عربية حسبي بأنك منطقي وبياني عربية قلبي.
Or are we talking about, centrist media streams, or are we talking about right-wing media streams?
I'm going to be cutting in sometimes, I hope you don't mind. Can you explain for some of the listeners who may not be into politics or debate or religion, what do you mean by left media, right media and centrist media?
Okay, so basically this is going to become a little bit technical, but hopefully this makes sense. I would compartmentalize it into two different things. Yeah?
Okay.
I would say you can say you're socially conservative and liberally fiscally liberal. Meaning here, you can believe in social conservatism. Usually in the Western discourse, social conservatism is referred to or suggests that the person would want some kind of value system whereby they're relying upon the traditions of their forefathers. So, for example, if someone is a conservative or a social conservative, they might prefer old school values, to kind of put it in a layman's term, They might prefer old school values, they might prefer like the nuclear family, they might advocate the nuclear family as being the best option, these kind of things. So that's more, I would say, socially conservative, right-wing type ideology. Sometimes now, when we talk about right-wing, we also talk about immigration. So we'll talk about, for example, the anti-immigration dialogue that's being had, So that's also associated with right-wing social conservatism. So within the Western discourse, when we say social conservatism, that's what we're talking about. When we say liberal, socially liberal, we're talking about people that are more open to change, usually, So more pragmatic from that perspective. Now, when we say fiscally, that's what we're talking about economics. So when we say liberally or fiscally liberal or fiscally, so we say, for example, that person believes in what is referred to as supply side economics. So what is basically more capitalistic,
What is capitalism?
Capitalism is, first and foremost, if you just put it in this kind of analogy here, if you go to a marketplace, like, I don't know, what's the closest market to here?
Let's just say Brixton Market.
Brixton Market or something. You go to a market. The competition that is going on in that market is really the manifestation of a minor capitalism. Well, capitalism is a competition between different firms in a given space. What the consequences of capitalism are is that you find that the rich usually get richer and the poor sometimes, I wouldn't say get poorer, but the
margin.
You can say, the disparity between the rich and poor is exacerbated.
Okay.
Do you see? So that's what capitalism is.
So what would you consider yourself?
I would consider myself nor a capitalist, nor a communist. I wouldn't say I'm a socialist. So I believe in a kind of middle ground. And what I mean by that is that I do believe in free market economics as a Muslim, I believe in free market economics, so I do believe that there should be a kind of meritocracy. Because communism eliminates all of meritocracy. Which means to say that if you believe that the government should have all of the means of production, that they should own all the means of production, as is advocated by Karl Marx in the Communist Manifesto. If that's what you believe, then actually you're now borrowing the room for competition, because now you can't make more money than the person next to you, like living next to you or whatever. So this whole idea of meritocracy is eliminated with communism.
Okay.
So at the same time, I don't believe, because in the Quran it says حتى لا يكون دولة بين الأغنياء منكم, in Arabic, which means in chapter 59 of the Quran, we don't believe in the redistribution of a lot of wealth only among the elites. So we don't believe in elitism either. So the Islamic balance is basically as follows. We don't believe in a pure capitalism. We don't believe in a pure communism. We believe in a free market system which has a redistributory element inside of it, which means there's charity, there's taxes, there's money being given from the rich to the poor. And that's what we believe the balance is.
So you believe, and my questions are going to come from, there's no structure to this. Good. So when you said to take, or let's say to assist the poor by taking from the wealthy, is that what Islam is about?
Well, as I say, within limits.
Okay, so
all these rich countries like Dubai,
Saudi Arabia, and then you have, in terms of disproportionality, you have extreme wealth in Saudi Arabia, if not like the richest because of the oil and so on and so forth, petrodollar, and then you have economically the poorest, exactly, Somalia, and why is that not redistributed in terms of wealth?
Because Muslims don't represent Islam, and that's the thing that I think people have to understand, that not everything which the Muslims do is indicative of what Islam teaches.
Okay, so what's the difference? Because I've always assumed that it's basically the same thing. So what is the difference between Muslim and Islam?
A Muslim is a practitioner of Islam.
Okay.
But a practitioner of Islam cannot embody all of the teachings of Islam in his or her actions.
So you're saying it's not realistic? The teachings are so, I don't want to say far-fetched, but for the unrealistic, the everyday human finds it a struggle to practice and abide by the laws of Islam.
No, what I'm saying is that we as Muslims believe that the only living embodiments of Islam are the prophets. So people like Abraham, Moses, Jesus Christ, who we believe in. For a lot of the listeners that might not know that, we believe Jesus Christ is the Messiah, and we believe that he's a prophet, and Prophet Muhammad. So we believe that these are the living embodiments of Islam per se, But in terms of now we're talking about, when we're talking about Muslim people, we're talking about 1.6 or 1.7 billion people according to Pew Research. So that's, a quarter of the world's population. In 2100, according to Pew, it's going to be 1/3 of the world's population. So when we talk about 1/3 of the world's population, it's very difficult to essentialize or generalize and say all of them are the same, or all of them have the same inclinations or personality traits. Muslims are different. So we have, within the scope of the 1.7 billion right now, we have people who are more inclined to an African traditional way of life, because 47% of Africa is Muslim. 47% of Africa is Christian, and 47% of Africa is Muslim. Some Muslims, and the majority of them are actually Asian. So from Indonesia, they're inclined to an Asian type cultural tradition.
But this is my I don't want to say my problem with Islam. As I said before, my mother was born in a Muslim country. She's no longer Muslim. And I think when she doesn't talk it a lot, but when she does, she said to me that it's very cultural, and that's the problem with, she finds, Islam, because it's almost like robotic. Someone just texted now and said that Islam, like Christianity, is about the free will to do what your heart impresses you to do. But I feel that as a child born in a Muslim household, and then their children, there's not that conversation to say, do you know what, I want you to read the Quran, the Torah, the Bible, and I want you to gain an understanding, and whatever your heart says, you should follow the lifestyle or the religion choice that makes sense to you. I feel that Islam in a household is usually forced upon children, and you must marry this person, you must do this, you must do that.
Well, let me give you a paradox, or maybe an irony that you might not have thought about.
Okay.
Because actually what you've said is a presupposition.
Is a what, sorry?
Is a presupposition, an assumption.
Okay.
I'll tell you what I mean by that. Your assumption is an ultimate open-mindedness in all endeavors and affairs is the best approach. Yeah? But here, if I say to you, would you ever tell your child that, okay, if your child came back from school one day and say, you know what, I don't like that white kid because he's white or she's white.
Okay.
Are you going to say to that child, your child, okay, well, you know what, you make your own decision?
No, because that's different.
All right, so there you go. So here you have your own socialized set of accepted norms and values, which you will inherently almost kind of imbue that to your child. The Muslim, the atheist, the naturalist, the communist, the capitalist will all socialize their children in that way.
Yeah, but then I feel there's a difference between natural socialization of saying those things to your children or how you raise them, but I still believe that due to external influence that the child's going to come into contact with. For example, the Quran also stipulates that you must abide by the law of the land. So if there's certain things where it says, okay, it's hard to separate the culture, example, the hijab, or the niqab, the burqa. So certain husbands enforce that upon their wives. Yes, there are wives that want to wear it, but at the same time, how do you create the difference between the culture and actually what the Quran stipulates you have to do?
You see, this is something which, again, I feel like once again the Western discourse is taking control of the way you're thinking about this, and I'll tell you why. Have you ever stopped to think that maybe it is the case, that the post-colonial Western discourse has caused white women in the Western world and black women in the Western world, to think that they have to dress and look in a certain way so as to create a higher capitalistic effect for the aristocrat or for the elitist, who will then consume the woman or Playboy magazine
based on her sexual
based on
image.
Whatever it is that's going to make him revenue and money. So you're thinking, okay, the husband, because this is the simplistic way in which the post-colonial narrative wants you to think. The husband is forcing the woman to wear the hijab. But you never think, okay, but actually it's the post-colonial elitist master that's forcing us how to dress and think so that we can sexualize ourselves in a certain way so that the elitist economist can benefit from us. So it's another man telling another woman what to do, but in a different context.
So if the woman doesn't want to wear the hijab, is she allowed? Is that okay?
I think. Sorry to interrupt you. I think that you're saying that there's two. No, I don't, because there's two extremes here. I understand where you're coming from, because I feel that everything from advertisements down to what you said, personal relationships, is driven by sexual desires, and those sexual desires are going to be driven by how a lady dresses.
Now, I was just talking about influence and power.
Yeah, so the influence is to, like you said, a woman feels she has to show everything for image purposes. But what about middle ground? So why do I need to be modest?
I'm not saying that you
cover
should,
everything.
I'm not saying that. Look, Islam doesn't tell, in the Quran in chapter 2 verse 256, it says, "La ikraha fi din qad tabayyana rushd min al-ghayy." That certainly there's no compulsion in religion. In other words, I can't force you to do it. You're a free agent with free will, and you can do whatever you want. That's my premise.
So she doesn't have to wear the hijab.
You don't have to do anything. You don't have to be a Muslim. You don't have to. I'm not allowed to.
But then what's going to get me to heaven?
No, hold on. I'm just saying that from a human perspective, the Quran says there is no compulsion in religion. That's a verse in the Quran. Right. Compulsion means coercion. Coercion means force. So the Quran is saying there is no force in religion. I can't force you or anyone else to do it, to do anything I want you to do. Noah, which is one of the greatest prophets according to both the Old Testament tradition and the Quranic tradition, his son was a non-believer. He was a non-believer, and he got drowned. In Genesis, I think chapter 9, but also in the Quran, in chapter 11 of the Quran. The point being is, if it was the case that prophets were meant to force people to be whatever it is that they believed in, then no doubt Noah would have forced his son, both in the Old Testament tradition and in the Quranic tradition. But I think this is again a caricatured understanding of religious narrative. It's not correct for us to say that this is happening. Now, that's not to say that sociologically that's not happening. When there's been people that are being forced to do things they don't want to do.
Okay, so
but that happens in religious context and non-religious context.
But that's the culture, though. So would you say, because that's the point I was getting at, do you feel that culture is massively interrupting let's say the correct path of what Islam is?
Yeah, I think that's I think you said that in a very interesting way.
Okay, so if culture,
it can massively interrupt. That's
because I think that's with any religion, because I know growing up in a Christian household and going to a predominantly like Nigerian church, their culture heavily influenced the religion, and that's why I kind of like pulled away from it, because the lines were getting blurred. It was like, okay, is this because it says in the Bible, or because it's your culture that I shouldn't do certain things? So I think it happens a lot in religion.
The problem I'm finding with, and maybe it's Western ignorance and the media, Western media, want to highlight that more than thousands of peace-loving Muslims. But at the same time, I feel that if culture is the main problem of a lot of practicing Muslims, that it's not actually Islam, then shouldn't Muslims as a collective that follow it void of culture speak up on the Muslims that want to infiltrate their culture more than the religion?
Speak up is quite misleading. I'll tell you why. If we have a room full of people, 100 people, all of them shout to the top of their voices. Yeah, 100 people in one room, all of them shout to the top of their voices. But 2 of them have a massive...
Platform.
No, let's just say they have a microphone with speakers. Yeah? That microphone, 2 of those people are going to be heard, and the 99 or 98 are not going to be heard. The reason why is because they have a amplified voice. The same thing applies with the Western narrative. Hollywood is owned by the white man, to say it in a very crude way. So you can't tell us to speak up when we don't have the same facilities. We have to work on social media and things like that. So really and truly, if you compare the media effect,
is that choice though? Because I feel that there's many again, finances play a massive part in this.
Okay.
But let's say the peace-loving or the ones that follow Islam in the correct fashion, let's say in Saudi Arabia, they have billions. Why would they not use that to, instead of giving citizenship to a robot?
Yeah, but still...
And now there's a massive platform for us knowing Sophie has Saudi Arabian citizenship.
Yeah.
In Saudi Arabia, they have platforms. Their biggest channel in Saudi Arabia is called Al-Awadi. And it's almost, you could say, a liberal channel. It's a liberal channel in the sense that it promotes, you could argue, a Western liberal narrative. So it's ironic in a sense that the biggest channels in the Muslim world are promoting the same things that the Western world itself is promoting. Yeah.
And that's due to the ties of money, oil.
Possibly, it could be, but do you know what? It's due to, I think, a post-colonial reality. Now, Saudi Arabia itself, because you use it as an example, wasn't colonized by the British, but the majority of countries in North Africa, including where I'm originally from, which is Egypt, were colonized by either Britain or France, So that mentality, and obviously the African countries themselves have the after effect of that post-colonial reality, which is why you'll find in a lot of our countries, I'm guessing African or Jamaican or like Caribbean, So, but you're originally African, let's say, That reality has spilled over to seeing things like, Fair and Lovely. Fair and Lovely is a white, something that whitens your skin, basically. So it ranges now, the post-colonial reality ranges from finding beauty aesthetically as being more white to actually being in agreement with everything the white colonial, post-colonial master tells you that is true. And we don't know how much this has encroached us. This has encroached us so much that now every question you ask, I promise you, is going to have a Western colonial, post-colonial slant. And that's to preempt what you're going to say.
I would agree to a degree.
I would agree, because even like before, before you came in, Lynn said that you were praying, and we both said like, why does it have? I think, like you said, how the Western media portrays it
so
is that everything is.
It should be the way the white man says it is.
Right.
Okay, let's look at, because someone asked on the platform when I put you up. With regards to the Quran.
Someone said you're smart, bro.
Thank you. Tell him that. When a smart man finds out, when a smart man recognizes a smart man, that makes him smart. So tell him
that you're smart too, Someone actually said that there's certain parts of the Quran as well as the Bible that are dated. So when I raise points surrounding violence, waging a holy war, jihad.
So once again, the post-colonial slant starts. The Western narrative starts. I haven't got a problem with that because it is important to address it.
It's important to talk. As I said to you before, I'm going to be asking questions that people ask me as well. And for myself as well, I'm not practicing Muslim, so I just want to know, when looking at the Quran, how can you see what is metaphorically maybe
the case and what is not metaphorically the case?
There you go.
Okay, chapter 3 verse 7, it tells you exactly that. منه آيات محكمات هن أم الكتاب وأخر متشابهات. So it says that this book has in it verses which are basically ambiguous and other verses which are foundational.
Yeah, but how are you supposed to know?
So basically,
if I'm a Muslim and I'm reading the Quran, how am I supposed to know which ones are ambiguous?
Good question. That is a good question. So the answer to that question is that those verses which speak in a way which can only be interpreted in one way, are the foundational verses. For example, chapter 112, verse 1 to 4. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say He's Allah, or God, one and only. So we believe in only one God. There's no Muslim that's going to come out and say, no, we believe in 2 gods or 3. As a Christian might say, no, we believe in the Trinity, 3 in 1, 1, 3. We don't have that. We don't have that confusion. So we say, Qul Huwallahu Ahad is a foundational verse. No one can come about and say, look, hold on, you don't believe in Qul Huwallahu Ahad, or we have a different interpretation. No one in the history of Islam has ever said that. So that's a foundational verse. That's not a metaphoric verse and cannot be subject to a plethora of different interpretations.
But then I think you're coming from a place of being educated, because there's many people that I feel, whether that be in rural places of the Middle East or even here where they're looking for belonging and they attach themselves to certain groups, how you eloquently explain that, how would they know that? For example, someone's messaged me saying, in the Quran it says, and kill them wherever you find them and turn them out from where they have turned you out.
Okay, that's good. So let me quickly answer both questions.
Okay.
What you've posited in the first instance is called an argument from ignorance. It's a fallacy in logic.
Okay.
So if you don't know something exists, it doesn't mean it's false. So if I say, okay, this person doesn't know it, therefore it must be false, that's called an argument from ignorance. If I say, as was the case, that Neptune doesn't exist because I can't see it, they couldn't see Neptune at one point. Yeah, and they had to kind of find Neptune, the planet, Neptune. They had to track it based on other planets. I say it doesn't exist, therefore it doesn't exist. That's an argument from ignorance. So from a logical perspective, it doesn't carry any weight. People don't understand things, they have to get educated. Like Francis Bacon said, knowledge is power. It's not my problem if people are ignorant. But there is an excuse in Islam within that. Within Islamic discourse, like if someone's ignorant, God will take care of them in accordance with the knowledge that they know.
Yeah, like in Christianity, it says like you will be treated on the basis of what light you know.
Exactly, yeah.
However, so let's look at, in the most basic way possible, you have young people that are seeing that many of their family members are being killed due to Western bombing, so on and so forth. And then they, whether it's an ignorant individual that starts a group and says, listen, the Quran justifies us going and killing these people that are killing.
So let's address this, because now you've mentioned this right. So let me put this in the simplest way possible. Try and make it as simplified as possible.
Layman's terms, yeah?
Layman's terms. Okay, so the Quran has in it, like you just mentioned, chapter 9, verse 5. What you just mentioned before. Kill them wherever
you know the Quran off by heart?
Kind of. You can say that, right? So you just mentioned chapter 9, verse 5, okay? Yeah. That's a problem, because why are you not mentioning chapter 9, verse 1, 2, 3, 4,
Tell
then
me
5,
what they are.
and 6, then 7, because that's called reading out of context, yeah?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So chapter 9, verses 1 to 4 stipulates that there was some kind of agreement between the Muslims and, at that particular time, the pagan Arabs. They had made an agreement.
What's the pagan Arab?
Pagan Arabs are...
Because how many people that listen...
So at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, there were two camps. There were people that had just newly become Muslim, and people that stayed upon the religion of their forefathers and believed in a multiplicity of gods.
Okay.
So they believed in different statue gods that they used to worship. Yeah? So there was an agreement between those two camps. There was an agreement between the Muslims and the pagan Arabs. Now, the first verse of chapter 9, which is called Surah At-Tawbah in the Quran, says that they have these pagan Arabs have not the agreement has not been taken care of. In other words, they have betrayed the agreement. And then it continues talking about what you should do. It says find them or you kill them or you find them, etc. Talking about in the context of war, because now a war has been issued. Just like in any international relation scene, where you have a treaty that is signed.
Where you can wage war.
Yeah, we're talking about a treaty that is signed from an international relations perspective that now has been broken, and now one party has the right to offend itself. So, offend or defend itself on the offending party.
Yeah.
And here it's in chapter 2, verse 190. It says, وَقَاتِلُوا الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُعْتَدِينَ. That fight those people who fight you and don't go across the bounds, because God doesn't like those who go across the bounds.
So does that still relate to today? Fight those people who fight you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It does.
Of course.
So
basically, Islam is not a pacifistic religion. So we're not saying that,
lay down and take rubbish.
Look, the idea of, sorry, but I'm going to put this in the crudest of terms, and no offense to any Christian listeners, but the idea of slapping someone in the cheek and giving them the other cheek, we don't have that idea. We have, if someone slaps you in the cheek, you're allowed to slap them back on their cheek.
Okay.
You understand? So if someone attacks me on the road, I'm allowed to fight them.
So then would you say, because a lot of...
But basically it's all defense. So from an international relations perspective, if a country is being attacked, they must fight back. It's not about that they should fight back or they have the option of fighting. They actually have to, in Islam, to fight back. They have to.
Oh, so you're saying that it's okay for them to
defend themselves.
To defend themselves.
Yeah.
So what's happening now with various groups?
Well, so terrorism is basically...
Because you're saying, sorry to interrupt, you said that everything that we think about is from a Western ideology.
Yeah.
However, Z and myself have spoken about this in the past, where on air management, I'm not going to justify.
Yeah.
However, I can understand that if I see continuous bombing to my country, if that means a couple casualties here, I wouldn't see it from the outside as necessarily a bad thing. In a way, the West is asking for it to a degree. But is it justified then?
Yeah, it's not justified. Because in the Quran it says...
It's not justified.
Look, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, chapter 5, verse 32, it says, إِنَّهُ مَنْ قَتَلَ نَفْسٍ, whoever kills one person, بِغَيْرِ نَفْسٍ, for not killing another person, أو فساد في الأرض, or creating corruption in the land, فَكَأَنَّمَا قَتَلَ النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا. It's as if they've killed all of humanity. So killing one innocent person, whether they be Muslim or non-Muslim, is killing like the whole of humanity. That's a very famous verse in the Quran. The point being is this.
But you just said defend.
Yeah,
you just said,
no,
you can't kill.
Innocent. The difference is this. If a combatant attacks you, that is a combatant, someone who wants to fight you. Whereas if it's a non-combatant, someone who is an innocent person, the Prophet told us you're not allowed to kill categories of people. Of them are the non-combatant, women, children, even monks, priests. You're not allowed to cut down trees.
Alright, so I'm going to ask a very stupid question now. Well, it's not stupid, but it's very...
By the way, this is not something controversial. The only reason, and I'll tell you once again, the only reason why you're asking this question is actually, it's sad enough and funny enough. I'll tell you why it's sad and I'll tell you why it's funny. It's sad because actually the same reason you're asking it is because the same Western colonial person that really, let's say, the Western colonial master came into your parents' country, yeah?
Yeah.
And they did that because they justified cultural superiority. They said, we are culturally superior to your parents.
Yeah.
The African tribal religion and the African tribal systems are inferior systems. And therefore, we have a culture which we need to give to these individuals, which is an important culture.
Okay,
the same reason now it's been moved from the colonial landscape to a post-colonial landscape. We still have the imperial, hegemonic Western USA that is attempting now to go into the Middle East rather than, let's say, Africa as much for colonial economic reasons. So they've had to invent a narrative. This narrative is a narrative of what Samuel Huntington called a clash of civilizations, a civilizational clash between the Muslims and the Western Hemisphere. That narrative now, which has been invented, people are starting to believe in it because they're not critical thinkers. They're not thinking, okay, well, actually, what is special about this verse in the Quran? Because actually, if you look at the Old Testament, Book of Numbers 31:18, it says not only do you kill the enemy, but you take the young girls as slave girls. In the Old Testament, right? Yeah. So in other words, prepubescents, you take them, you enslave them, you rape them. You can rape them. And
Old Testament says that.
Yeah, Old Testament says that. And most of the commentators have said that. Yeah. I have not come across one single commentary that has actually differed from that understanding, that literalistic understanding of the Old Testament. So why don't we talk about that verse? Because that verse is actually more dramatic than any verse in the Quran that you'll find.
No, I've spoken about that, but then when we look at the Old Testament, oftentimes the death of Jesus does away with a lot of the old practices in the Old Testament. So the New Testament.
So Matthew, so it says, Jesus says, "I'm not come to do away with the prophet; I've come to affirm them." What does the word affirm mean? This is a discussion, but the thing is as follows: if Jesus Christ is God. If Jesus Christ is God, because that is the Nicene Creed 325 understanding of Christianity. Yeah. He is the author of the Old Testament because the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are all one. Therefore, those texts in Deuteronomy, like Deuteronomy chapter 21 verse 10, Numbers chapter 31 verse 18, and other verses, which are very, very much, vicious, you could say. Very vicious.
Why don't people talk about
No, these are not only authored by Jesus Christ, but they're sanctioned by him himself because he is God. So if the argument is that this is the Old Testament, this is what about the New Testament? Yeah. Well, Jesus must have been the author of the Old Testament because he is God.
Yeah, no, the Trinity.
See how that
There's
works?
a lot of Christians that even argue with regards to the Trinity. But going back to defending your country, you're saying that in terms of you can defend yourself if they're the combatant. But my thing is how the Western world is set up.
يا لغتي عربية